According to Maxwell Anderson, without law, men are beasts. With this, I'll be welcoming you to another exciting episode of The Law Gallery, coming to you from the Lagos studios of KAFTAN Television. Khalid, Bada is my name. And as you know, we always bring different discussions about the law, the rule of law, the Nigerian constitution, and everything in between. And today is no different. We'll be talking about the recent coups that has been happening in different countries across West Africa, and also the recent coup that happened in Gabon. But before we go into the discussion, we would take the news updates on the program today. I'll be back.
A group of councillors in the Eastern Ijebu local government area, Ogun State, suspended President Wale Adedayo for 3 months for allegedly mismanagement and financial mismanagement. Reacting to these developments, Adedayo told our reporter that this may be true, adding that police officers bombarded the local government area secretariat along with some thugs on Thursday morning. Journalists report that this follows an invasion of the local government area secretariat by more than 100 mobile police on Thursday morning, following alleged move by Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun to remove Adedayo from office, who recently accused the governor of withholding federal government appropriations for the state's local government area. 7 councillors, Fasheyi Adesuji, representing Italy Ward 7, Bolutife Oshunfisan, representing Imusin Ward 2, Kemi Aliu, representing Imobi 10 Ward, Adeniyi Adenuga, representing Imusi 1 Ward, Abbas Sidikat, representing Ward 5 of Owu, Biyi Oguntubo, representing Imobi's 9th Ward, and Rotimi Williams, representing Ajambedele's 11th Ward, on Thursday said the local government area legislative council had received various allegations that needed to be investigated and ordered Adedayo to appear first board at its next meeting on Thursday, September 14, 2023. In a settlement letter exclusively obtained by our reporter and signed by 7 councillors, including leader of the House of Representatives, Fasheyi Adesuji, representing Ward 7 of Italy, 15 charges were filed, brought against the suspended president. Following the listed allegations, the chamber further decided the president must resign in order to properly conduct investigations. Chairman of the council, Professor Wale Adedayo, was suspended for 3 months pending the conclusion of the investigation and must therefore return all council's assets in his possession to the vice president, who will act as president during presidential suspension as provided for in the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. Moving on to the next, the governor of Rwanda and Cameroon have reshuffled their militaries, a move seen as a response to recent coup in Niger and Gabon. According to the national newspaper Rwanda News Times, the federal government has approved the retirement of 12 generals and some officers. The publication states that the retirement was announced on Wednesday, August 30, in a statement issued by the Rwanda Defense Forces. Among the retirees are 2 4-star generals, James Kabarebe and Fred Ibingira, as well as 2 3-stars general, Charles Kayonga and Frank Mushu Kamanzi. Kabarebe and Kayonga previously held the position of Chief of Defense Staff of the RDF, while the other 2 had previously served as Chief of Staff. The statement said in part, the President also approved the retirement of 83 senior officers, 6 junior officers, and 86 senior non-commissioned officers, of which 678 were terminated and 160 were terminated for medical reasons. In Cameroon, President Paul Biya also overhauled the military with new appointments. This is stated in a statement signed by Biya and broadcast on X, formerly known as Twitter. The statement was written in French, the country's official language and communication. Lastly, on today's news update, the House of Representatives announced that it had clarified how the National Agency for Great Green Wall (NAGGW) reportedly spent 81.2 billion naira to plant 21 million trees in 11 frontline states. The states are Kebbi, Sokoto, Zamfara, Katsina, Kano, Jigawa, Bauchi, Gombe, Adamawa, Yobe, and Borno states. During a fact-finding hearing on the use of environmental funds released to NAGGW from 2015 to the present, lawmakers questioned some of the spending made during this period. The commission was chaired by Ismaila Dabo. Lawmakers expressed their displeasure with conflicting financial reports filed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, and the agency. Recall that during the plenary session in July, the House of Representatives decided to set up a special committee to consider the use of the environmental funds released to NAGGW. After reviewing the documents submitted to the Commission, lawmakers found that 697.372 million naira, 500 million naira, and 480.657 million were spent on refurbishing office space. While capital project and constituency project, it commented that 11.28 billion naira had been spent. Lawmakers also questioned the rationale for keeping billions of naira in the accounts of government agencies for several years without returning them to the Treasury in accordance with current fiscal regulations. Lawmakers complained that the agency had neglected to audit its financing since its inception and frowned on the vast sums of money being spent in capacity building and areas unrelated to NAGGW's mission. Recall that the agency's 1 billion naira was fraudulently laundered by some Federal Environment Ministry officials in 2015, but was recovered by the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences ICPC. According to investigative sources, the illegal remittances were carried out in corporates with some financial banks and exchange offices.
Welcome back from that break, the news update break. And before we went on the break, I told you that we'll be coming back with our brilliant legal practitioner with whom we'll be discussing the recent coup happening particularly in West Africa, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and now from Central Africa we have Gabon, where the military has ousted the President Ali Bongo. Now, it was reported that army officials appeared on national television to say that they have seized power in Gabon from President Ali Bongo and who was re-elected to a third term in office in the Central African nation. Now, according to newsmen, the officers said they were annulling the results of Saturday's election, which the opposition had denounced as fraudulent. Now, 12 soldiers announced that they were dissolving all the institutions of the republic, and they have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime. Now, we'll be speaking with Barrister Uthman Issa Tochukwu, who will be examining coup in West Africa and particularly the human rights violations that could result from the military rule and coup, perhaps subsequent coups which we do not pray happens. Thank you for joining us on the program today, Barrister.
Thank you very much for having me, Precious.
Pleasure to have you. Now, let's just go directly into the discussion. What is your opinion about the recent coups that has been happening in Africa?
Thank you very much once again for having me.
You're welcome.
When you ask about my opinion, in the recent happenings in some of the African countries, I would tell you with regards to this particular coup is unfortunate because I mean we are in a democracy, and of course we understand that in democracy we have actors and actors, and some of those actors and actors was built upon the premise of the constitution that established these various countries.
True.
Like we know, the constitution is very clear, and I will be speaking in line with the provisions of the Constitution of Nigeria, which I believe is not much too different from other African countries that operate democracy as a means of governance. So if you look at the Nigerian constitution, we operate presidential system of government in line with the provisions of section 130 and 140 of the constitution, right? And also, if you look at that particular provision, the constitution also made a provision for separation of powers in line with provisions of section 4, 5, and 6, the powers of the executive, the powers of the legislature, and that of the judiciary. These are the tripartite pillars that operate within the ambit of a democracy in accordance with our law. And if you look at these provisions, it gives you a clear cut of how government should operate within a democracy. And this is what brings a bar to military coup d'etat or military coup, within the country. Once military take over, what you see is that the first thing they do is to discard the constitution.
The constitution, yep.
Yes, to set it aside, so that every other thing that is built on the premise of that constitution is to that extent of the military takeover non-existence, is dissolved. So for that reason, they have automatically usurped the power of democracy. So whatever institution that exists at that level will no longer be recognized in law, because there is no law already in place. Now, with this in mind, it stands condemnable.
Barrister,
condemnable.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now, we understand the fact that democracy is built on the provisions of the Constitution. But if we're not going to be sycophantic, or if we're not going to be hypocritic, looking at what has been happening in most of these African countries in recent times, Gabon, for an example, the family of Ali Bongo has been in power for 53 years. And the country is supposed to be practicing a presidential system of government. Now, being in power for 53 years, passing down from his father, from the grandfather, to Ali Bongo himself, it has transcended from what seemed to be the presidential system of government to a similar monarchical system. Now, has that not actually breached the provision of the Constitution in a way?
I think I do not know the extent of their constitutional provisions. Unlike Nigeria here, I'm aware that our constitution is very clear about 2-time tenure for the president, right?
Yes.
First 4 years and another one 4 years. After that 8 years, you are forbidden from taking over power to run for that particular office for life. So I do not think it is similar with that of Gabon or some of these countries where some of these things are taking place. But there's one thing that we should note. Even this particular guy that had just taken over power in Gabon is a cousin to the president, the ousted president. Is a cousin, so he's still part of that lineage. And that is what we're saying, that if their constitution has not addressed this issue of two-tenure of presidency, it is important that they should revisit their constitution to address it, because it actually defeats the essence of democracy, and it actually defeats the essence of testing the competencies of other people that the country may have, right, to govern the administration of that particular country. And I think it is as a result of that some persons are they are dissatisfied with the way things are run in that particular state, and they think they have what it takes to run it differently. But apart from that, there are other issues that surrounds, some of these African countries. Like when you look at their colonial history, Some of these countries are still tied down to their colonial overlords. They have not given them, that little fresh breath of air to be able to exercise their ultimate power of sovereignty as a country. And that has given the military of that particular country this kind of agitation to usurp power and to do it differently. But that's notwithstanding, it still stands condemnable. Until we begin to address it from that point, we are not going to get it correctly. And I think it is time for all the African communities to come together. We know that Gabon is not a member of ECOWAS, but African Union can come together to collaborate with other African communities to see that how they can ameliorate this problem before it could spread over to other countries, that are stabilized within Africa, including Nigeria. And now, I don't pray that such should descend to us.
Yes, I mean, now, looking at what the soldiers actually said, I will be quoting them. They said, "We have decided to defend peace by putting an end to the current regime, citing irresponsible, unpredictable governance resulting in a continuing deterioration in social cohesion that risks leading the country into chaos." Now, from what we know about military regime, some of the disadvantages of a military regime is the suspension of constitution, lack of check and balances, and no respect for human rights. And the soldiers who have taken over power claim to be leading the country into peace in quotes. Now, how is this possible? How do you think they intend to balance this?
I think it's just a military statement, so to say. I wouldn't use the word political statement because military are not associated with politics, apart from taking care of the internal and external security aggression that may interfere in a country. I think it is a paradox, or rather an irony, for an anti-democratic agent to be talking about taking care of a democracy or democratic institutions, ethics and ethos. Because if you observe what happens when military takes over, is first of all to suppress the freedom of the press, and that goes to show the extent to which human rights can be abused.
Barrister, please hold that thought. We'll go on a short break now, and when we come back, we'll continue the discussion from there. Welcome back from the break. Before we went on the break, Barrister Tochukwu was talking about one of the characteristics of the coup and military rule, which is the suppression of the press rights. Barrister, could you pick it up from there?
Yes, thank you very much for having me, Khalid. I was saying that, the general characteristics or features of military coup is, first of all, suspension of the constitution, suspension of press freedom, and going against anything that has to do with rule of law. So if this is the features of the military coup d'etat or the military coup, then it becomes contrary or irony for the military to be talking about securing our democratic institutions and adhering to the democratic principles. I think that I disagree with that position. And I think it is time for African countries to come together and work on the path of development. The military rule is not the best for Africa. It's going to set us back. In fact, it is going to take us from the third world country where we are to probably another type of country that have not
a new category on its own.
Exactly. And this is a very serious issue that the AU should come together and see how they can call the general meeting of all the African countries to converge and discuss about the path to growth.
Naturally, anyone would feel there are basic provisions of the Constitution that actually maybe hold the power of the military or suppress the power of the military in a way that these coups will not be able to work, because we are in the 21st century, and anyone would believe that we should have gone past the period of military coup where our military officers would just take up power. Is there anything like that in the Nigerian constitution that in a way prevents such occurrences?
Like I have said, yes. If you look at the constitution of Nigeria, we are operating a presidential system of government.
Yes.
And because of that, it provides for what we can call separation of powers. And that separation of powers is automatically, a bar for military hijack of power within the democracy. That separation of power is anchored on Section 4, Section 5, and Section 6 of the 1999 Constitution. Section 4 provides for the powers of the legislature to make laws, while Section 4 provides for the powers of the executive to implement those laws that have been made by the legislature, while the Section 6 provides for the power of the judiciary for interpretation of some of these laws, right? So where these tripartite institutions are in place, it forms an automatic bar for military to hijack power, because they wouldn't have any room where they can come in. And that's why it's always a kind of power that comes by force. And when they do that, the first thing they do is to first of all remove the constitution, which had automatically placed a bar on them to take over power. Do you see the reason why each time there is a military coup, the first thing they do is to remove the constitution? Because the constitution automatically did not give them window where they can take over power. And that is why the Nigerian system of government and the constitution of Nigeria has provided for some of these, have made provision for some of these things. That's notwithstanding. One thing is to have a law, and another thing is for that particular law to be respected.
True.
And this is where we are. We cannot actually say that these African countries that are facing this power turmoil today does not have these laws. But to what extent is these laws into implementation? This is another question that we should be asking.
Now, we're talking about the human rights, protection of human rights in places where coups have occurred. How do you think these violations of human rights could affect less privileged, the women, people living with disability, and children? How do you think it could affect them? This type of there's always a problem when this type of thing happens, right? And it comes with what I could call a collateral damage. Collateral damage in the sense that some of these people you just mentioned, the women, children, and all of that, they are very innocent of this reality. And because of the pressure that comes with some of these things, it automatically affects them. People will now begin to flee away from their country to seek refuge where they can find peace for the meantime, just like it happened in Sudan and some of that places. This is like war, or a kind of a preparation for war. Once military takes over, the next thing you see is the global community trying to come together to see how they can forestall peace and talk to them, like what Nigeria has started doing in the other countries that happened before Gabon. In
they
Niger.
have sent several delegates in Niger how they can discuss for peace. But you see, why this peace talk is going on, so many people had already flee away from the country.
True.
Right? Because for fear of their own life, and you need to have that security. So this is also an automatic violation of their rights, because ordinarily they are not supposed to leave their home base to seek asylum or something else where they can find the peace of mind. Now, coming to address it, you cannot address issue of human rights violation when coup has taken place, except you address the coup itself. You need to first of all restore power back to normalcy before you can begin to address people that their rights have been violated, so that they can come back to their day. So the first thing we should be discussing now is how do we approach these guys for them to seek power back to where it used to be. Even if they don't want the particular president that they just posted out, they could have a kind of bargain for another kind of person to come under democracy. Because we must institutionalize democracy in Africa. Even though some of us have argued that democracy is not yet the best for us, but that is not to concede that military is the way forward. It's not. So no matter how we look at it, we just have to accept the nascent democracy and begin to nurture it. Different countries have faced different challenges before they get to where they are. And I think this is what is facing Africa now. And we just have to navigate through these challenges and then begin to chart our path to progress. Because Nigeria too have faced their own of military coup. And I don't anticipate any type of military coup in Nigeria anymore because it's not the best.
Now, how do you think these countries can transition back to the democratic process? What are the advice you could give based on that? Because obviously the military the military wouldn't want to drop the power. So what could you prescribe?
The advice I could prescribe is for some of these countries to address the issue that concerns their constitution. Okay. The AU, ECOWAS, and Economic Community of Central African States, which Congo is part of, which also some of these countries are also part of, Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso, and some of them. They have to address their constitution so that it can, including Rwanda, so that it can allow for just 2 terms, of the president. You cannot be occupying power for over 40, 43 years. For God's sake, you are not the only person in that country. This alone, even within the family, there is some certain rights a certain individual can wield within the family, and it will cause that kind of chaos. So you cannot keep on holding on to power to that extent. And since the Constitution has provided for them to stay that long in power, it is important that they should address the problem from their laws. They have to address it from the Constitution. Until that is done, it's going to be very difficult to begin to have conversation around it, because the military will continue to insist that the proper thing should be done if these leaders continue to remain in power without having anything to show for it. It is a different thing if you have been there for that long and you are making impact that everybody is seeing. Even the people will be against it to be upset. But if you observe in this country, when it happens like this, you will find out that the citizens are happy that the military has taken over. What does that tell you? It tells you that over the years that the power has resided on some of these people who claim to champion the affairs of democracy in that country. It's not actually doing the right thing. And that is what it just tells you. And that's why anytime this military guy takes over, the citizens are happy with the takeover of the military, even though it's against the democratic ethos. Right? So they should address it from their laws to say 2-term tenure, no more. Go and rest so that another person can come over. But so long as the laws have not been able to address this, it's going to continue to be a problem.
Thank you very much, Barrister Issa Tochukwu. Now, what would you advise the international community? There has been speculations that the ECOWAS was going to use force to return power to Niger, and we don't know what the opinions that will be going on for Gabon. Now, what would you advise the international community to do about this?
I don't want to speak on that issue of speculation. I'm a lawyer, and we are trained to speak on facts. And the fact we have, as far as there is concerned, is that ECOWAS is not interested in the application of force to restore power in Niger. They have shown that by sending several delegates, including that of religious leaders, to go to Niger and parley with some of these guys and see how they can come back to town. And the military over there, they have started giving a good listening ears to some of these delegates to see how they can bring back power to normalcy. Having said that, I think one of the things that the African community should be doing, this organization, they actually have to begin to have a different discussion entirely, not just about getting our leadership correct. We should have a United States of Africa. What is wrong with that? Why can we not have a global currency that unites African continent? Why can we have something like a African continental free trade that were entered the other time, that we can allow all the ECOWAS countries to transact within a particular currency. But why? You cannot use any of the African currency to steal bail, to conclude any transaction at the global community, and this is bad. It means that indirectly we are still being subjected to some of this colonialism. And it is very important for us to begin to have this conversation. In fact, if you study the cause of every military coup in Africa, you would understand that it's as a result of this, constant agitation of being too submissive to the global community. And that's why we are still, facing some of these problems. There is need for us to sit down together and chat a kind of devise a means of solving our own problem by ourselves without necessarily seeking a recourse for machinery outside Africa. We have enough. We have what it takes. Like I've argued, we actually do not need much from these people, but we don't know. They are the ones that need from us. But from the way, from the way they have worked on our psyche, it becomes like we are the one that is in need of them. We don't need these people. If African continent can come together and create a kind of ecosystem that will unite all the whole African continent, for us to have one currency, for us to go into, imagine some ECOWAS country, you cannot even go there without your passport or visa. True. It shouldn't be happening. We should have a free transparency in terms of going into some of these countries because we are Africa, because we share the same values, identity, and all of that. And ultimately, we'll begin to address it from that angle. We cannot meet the problem from the board. We'll just be doing a kind of mushroom solution, and it's not going to be the end. It's not going to be the permanent solution.
Thank you very much, Barrister. I really appreciate how you've done justice to the point, and you've also outlined solutions to most of the problems facing most African countries and how we can prevent subsequent coups happening in other African countries. I really appreciate that, Professor Tochukwu, Barrister Tochukwu, rather. Really sorry.
For having me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Yes. And there you have it. We have done justice to the discussion for today, the coup in Niger, coup in Gabon, and we also spoke about how to prevent further coup and how to also help ourselves as a continent. As a continent, we need to pay attention to important factors, which includes production and also thinking of how to move our government further into better places instead of just, trampling upon the constitution, having a disguised form of democracy. Now, this is where we wrap up the program for today. I really appreciate your time, and we'll return same time, same station, another time. I remain Khalid. Bada. Bye for now.